Alright, so hello everybody. In this video, I'm going to be going over activity 122, which is the catch a turtle leaderboard. This code is going to be very, very exciting. As we've been talking about, we're starting to get to the point where we're able to create these games using Python and the turtle module. And so in this activity, you're going to actually be creating a custom module that is going to allow you to implement a leaderboard in our catch a turtle game. And so if I go down here to Visual Studio, I can actually run the code. And so I can end up showing you, this is my reading files intro. Let's go back to my main Python file. So if I run this, you'll actually see that it gets prompt for me to enter my name here. And then whenever I press enter, it brings up our turtle game. And so we can end up clicking on this. Remember, the black turtles are the ones that's the current active turtle for me. And then all the colored turtles are the ones that are saved. And so I've got it where I just ended up getting 10, and so I actually just beat the high score, and so now I have it where I'm actually tied with second place previous me, and then we've got these other entries in here. Now, one of the things that I even want to make a change with my code, right, is, as you notice at the very beginning, and then it prompted me for my name in the terminal. One of the things I want to end up changing is where I can end up having the window where that'll output. And then additionally, as you can see here, I actually have 6 entries in here. And so that's one of the things that I also need to implement, is that I want to have it where it'll end up having just the top 5. But anyways, now that you know what this looks like, let's go ahead, let's get down to business. So in terms of reading and writing files in Python, there are 2 things I want to end up talking to you about. Or 2 different options that I want to talk to you about how you can read files. Before we get to that point though, oh, that was cool. We got a little, I guess that's whenever I do peace sign, and it's a, or is it this? I don't know. But anyways, the little balloons went off. So before we get to the point of opening and closing files, it's very important that we understand file paths. And so if we have something that's like an absolute file path, as you can see, it's going to include, basically it's going to start with the hard drive, right? So if you're on a Windows computer, it's going to start with this C:, and then you're going to end up having your folder directory, which is going to take you to the specific folder that you're in. And so what we're in for this activity is 122. And then you can see that I have this actual Python file, and this is the actual Python file I'm currently in. And so what this is called is the absolute file path. Now, if you go over here, if I'm already in my 122 folder, so as you can see, we're in the 122 folder here. If I'm trying to reference the A122 underscore leaderboard text, this is actually just the relative file path. Because we are currently in the 122 folder in VS Code, we can end up using the relative file path. And so this is what we've been doing so far this semester, and you ended up noticing that if you weren't in that folder that contained that actual file, you ended up getting an error, right? Because it said that the directory did not exist, or it was having trouble bringing up that file. But anyway, so that's the absolute file path as well as relative file path. We need to make sure that we know about those 2 before we move on to the next step. And so these are how we can, this is how we can end up opening and closing files in Python. And so there's 2 different methods that we can end up using. One is better than the other, personally, I believe. And I'll end up telling you that reasoning. So anytime that we're trying to open a file, we can either go option 1 or option 2 here. Now with option 1, what we end up doing is we assign a variable, and we go file equals, or whatever you want to end up naming that variable, right? Just make sure that your variables are meaningful. So file equals, and then we have this open function. Now, just as you can see here, the open function has all these different arguments that we can end up using, right? It has the file path. So that's what we're throwing in here for the relative file path. Additionally, there's different reading modes as well, or different just modes of opening that file. So for instance, if we have it as the R mode, it's only going to allow us to read. If we have it as W, it will only allow us to write. And so if you use the W method, that'll actually completely wipe your file out completely before it actually goes to write to it. So be very, very careful with that. They also have the buffering, encoding, errors, new line, close FD, opener. These we won't be messing with. However, the file and mode, we will be needing to know those. And so what we can end up doing here though is we can open this file, and so if I have the file, I can end up providing lines of code, right, where we can manipulate or read the file contents in these lines, okay? Now, whenever we're done with that file, let's say that we read some of the contents or we ended up writing to that file, we always need to make sure with option 1 that we actually close that file. Now in option 2, this is where we are using the with keyword. And so what we can do is we can use with, and then we can use the open function. So I'm opening that relative file path, and then the mode that I have specified here is R+. Now R+, what that will allow you to do is to read. So I'm gonna do R+ colon allows, so let's just do this. R+ allows us to read and write to a file, okay? So R+ allows you to read and write. If I just put R in here, it's just going to allow us to read. And so as you can see later on, I have print, and then it has reader.read lines. So that's a function that allows you to read all the lines. But then at the bottom here, I have .write. If I have that, then that's going to actually throw us an error, because all I ended up doing for the mode for this is I just opened this with the read mode. And so if I end up putting R+ in there, then it'll allow me to read and write to this file. But anyways, let's go ahead, let's run our code. And so as you can see, the only thing that we're actually printing out is the read lines in here. What I also want to do additionally before we run this code is I want to take a look at our leaderboard file. And so what we could do in here is we could end up taking out some of these entries, right? And so we can kind of mess with this. Maybe we'll take out rainbolt 10 there. We'll keep Mr. Rainbolt 10. But what we can do now is I'm going to save that file, right, because we've updated it. And what I'm going to show you is how we can read content using Python from a file, and then how we can also write. Now, as you can see here, I have the write, and then it says Tim, 1. Now, Tim obviously is the player's name. 1 is obviously the player's score. And so what we have here is comma separated values, which are CSVs, right? But we do have this saved as a text. Later on in the semester, you're going to be using CSV files, which are basically just files that contain information that's separated by commas. But anyways, as we can see also at the end here, we do have this \n. What that's going to do is create a new line in Python. And so just as you can see here, we have it where there's this new line at the very, very end, right? And so for each of these entries, there's actually going to be there's going to be that \n. So if we go through here, we can end up running this. And so just as we had in our code, it's going to print out all the current lines. Now the read lines, that function is going to allow us to read. So as you can see, I have the open, and then I open that file path in that specific mode as reader. Reader becomes our file variable, okay? So it's just like how we had the turtle module, we did import turtle as T, and then later on, anytime that we want to reference the turtle module, we just did T dot, then capital T for turtle, parentheses. Basically the same case here where we're assigning reader to be our actual file variable, okay? And so now, just as we were saying, the read lines function, that's going to create a list of all the lines in the file. And then what I did here at the end is I ended up actually writing in a new entry. And so that was Tim, 1. And so if I go back here, as you can see now, we actually have that new entry that's been added in. Okay, so this is just kind of a little bit of an intro on reading and also writing files and some of those functions that we're going to end up using in this activity. All right, anyways, let's go ahead, let's get ready to begin. So here are our goals for this. Just as we were saying, we're going to be creating a custom Python module that's going to contain leaderboard functions. And so we're going to break the leaderboard up into those key events that need to happen, that need to occur. We're going to also end up writing the data permanently to store this in the leaderboard text file. We're also going to have to manipulate strings and lists. If you start to think about that overall process of how we're going to end up placing the scores in the text file, right? You're going to have to manipulate the text file, right? So that's going to be with strings and lists. We're going to also use the relational and logical operators to be able to determine the high scores and other game-related conditions. Then also, just as we were talking about with anytime we have a function that's defined, we always want to be returning something. And so let's go ahead, let's get ready to do this. So in this activity, they're talking about how we're going to enhance our Catch a Turtle game, just as we were talking about. The 4 main points of our game were that we're going to have random appearance of the turtle object on the screen. We're going to also have the event of the turtle object being clicked. The score should also update, and then the timer should also update, right? Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to add the following functionality to our existing game code. So the first thing is you're going to ask the player's name before starting the game. We're going to also, once the time is up, check to see if the player is eligible for the leaderboard. So this is going to include multiple steps, right? And it's kind of nice because they give us this little to-do list here. But what we want to do is load the current leaderboard data from a text file into a list. Then what we're going to do is we're going to compare the player's scores to the scores in the list to see if that player has a score that is greater than or equal to the existing leader scores. Now, if it is, right, we're using an if statement there. If it is, what we want to do is we want to insert the player's name and score into the leaderboard list in the correct position, right? We're going to also save the data from the new leaderboard list to the leaderboard text file and then replace the previous text file content, all right? And then finally, we're going to be displaying the leaderboard data on the screen. And so these are our key events that need to actually happen with our leaderboard, okay? So let's go ahead, let's pop down here. What they have here is they have the update the Catch a Turtle code. So once you are completed with Catch a Turtle program from the previous activity, if you do not have a fully functioning game, refer to your teacher for instructions or how to get a copy of the completed solution. So if that is the case, I'm gonna actually have that posted on the Canvas modules for you all so that you can end up downloading that. And that's actually what I'm gonna end up bringing up as well to show you all. So the leaderboard module, you will be placing functions for a leaderboard into a separate file and importing those functions. You will need to make sure all of the files used in this activity are in the same folder. In the import section of your Catch a Turtle program, they want us to add the following line to import the leaderboard module. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get that file. I'm going to download our Catch a Turtle game, and then we're going to begin from. And so this is the actual code here. So it'll be 121. It should actually say final or main code .py. But what you can do once you've got this brought up, just go ahead and click download for this. And so once you download that, that will end up going into your downloads folder. Now remember, this is only if you do not have your 121 code completed, right? So if you have your 121 code completed, you don't have to end up downloading this, right? This is just if for whatever reason you were like super behind, you don't have the actual code. If that's the case for you, great, go ahead and download this. If not, you can bring up your actual code, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually drag this file in here. So I'm gonna go to my downloads, and then we're going to end up bringing in this most recent one. And so we've got, boom, right there, 121 countdown. And so this is my previous file, right? The actual game. So if we end up bringing this up, you'll end up seeing that we've got the timer. It's gonna go for 30 seconds, right? What I highly suggest as we're doing this, we're gonna actually change the timer so that it's not the full 30 seconds. But anyways, you get it. It's gonna go all the way through, and then towards the end here, it should show us that game has ended. So we're just testing it out. Boom, we're making the high score. These small turtles are really hard to click. Okay, anyways, you get it. So now we're at 29. Now as you can see, we're not able to continue to click to play the game, so time's up. That's the basic point that we should be at. As you can see, turtles different colors. The turtles are also stamped onto the screen. The turtles also are different sizes as well. So that's our basic functionality there. All right, so we got 121 brought up here. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna take that guy off there too. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead, let's get back down to business. And so we are back in 122 here. Let's actually do this. Let's bring it up in here. Give me 1 second. All right, perfect. So just as they said here, step number 2 is import the leaderboard as LB. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So import leaderboard as LB. Okay, so that's what we want to end up using. So then what we're going to end up doing is we're going to create a leaderboard file. Now what I'm going to do with my previous leaderboard is I'm going to call that backup, because that's the one that I completed. Now, as you can see, we end up running into this issue. Now, this issue right here is saying that import leaderboard cannot be resolved, and that's because we have not created our actual leaderboard file, okay? So we're gonna end up seeing, just as they said, expect an error, and that's because the leaderboard file does not exist. So in the game configuration section, just before initializing the turtle objects, initialize the variables necessary to create the leaderboard functionality. So the pseudocode is provided for us. So just as they have here the leaderboard file name, and then they also have the player name. So they have ask for player name. So let's just go ahead. We're gonna take this, we're gonna paste this in here. Now, just as we said, they have the pseudocode for us. So then we're gonna go into here, we're gonna assign this. Now ask for the player's name. I'm gonna comment that out. What we wanna do is I wanna actually use turtles setup, right? So trtl dot, and then if I go down in here, we can end up seeing all the different functions that we can end up using. And so let's look at this and let's see if we can find anything. So they have number input, we don't want that. Let's see if they got anything else that we can end up using in here. Now remember, the other option is that we can just bring up the actual turtle documentation. And so as we're going down here, I believe that it's like text input. Okay, yeah. So we got text input here. So then now what we can end up doing is there's a title. So title equals welcome. And then let's do this. So prompt equals please input player's name. Okay. So let's go ahead, let's run this. We're gonna end up seeing this error show up. I'm gonna comment that out temporarily. And so let's see here. So as you can see here, we now have the welcome screen. Please input player's name. And so we got Mr. Rainbolt. So let's go OK. And then now, as you can see, our code is running. Okay. Now, one of the things I also want to end up doing is I want to put in line 11, let's print, and let's make sure that our player name is going to be in the correct format. So it should be a string data type. And so let's just make sure that this gets printed out all right in there. Okay, perfect. So as you can see here, we got Mr. Rainbolt as the name. So excellent. Just as we said, my previous code that I showed you, it was asking us for that in the terminal. And so we're trying to make our code even better. And so now we have it where it's going to be a text input window that shows up in Turtle. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's continue with this. So they have check your work. Okay, perfect. Yep, that's exactly what we have, except for this part, we made it even better, right? Because we have it where it's the text input from Turtle. Okay, so at this point, can you tell what each variable will be used for? Well, yes, the leaderboard file name, we're bringing that in. That's our relative directory, right? And so we're going to end up using that file name so we can end up later opening that file. And then the player name, that's what we're going to end up sending into or writing into the leaderboard file if they reach a high score. So, let's see here. What's the second question? Why is it better user-centered design to place the input statement asking for the username before the turtles are initialized? Well, obviously we don't want our players to be freaking out and missing out on the game, right? So if they're typing their name in while the turtles are already there, they're probably their attention is gonna be brought to the turtles, right? And then also they might kind of get worried because the timer might end up starting possibly, they might be worried about that happening. So that's why we start off first just asking the user for their name. So they have add the following function to your code. Make sure it is placed before the events section of your program. So the code to add, so we have this function, manage leaderboard. So manage leaderboard manages the leaderboard for the top 5 scores. Define manage leaderboard. We have global variables. These two global variables are score as well as spot. So we're going to keep that in mind. We can also make a little change to those two global variable lines there to make our code be a bit more organized. So let's go ahead, let's copy this. Now they say, once again, add the following function to your code. Make sure it is placed before the event section of your program. So this is game configuration, initialize the turtles, and then we have the game functions here. So we're gonna go ahead and place it right in here. Okay, now one of the things that I want to change here is this global score. I'm going to put a comma and then spot. So what this does is it basically sets up in one line the variable score to be global and also the variable spot to be global. Now, as you can see, I end up having this issue that's showing up. And why is that? It's because our import leaderboard as LB, we commented that out temporarily just so that we wouldn't run into any issues or errors with that. But as you can see now, we have the leaderboard module, and what they want is for us to have these functions get names, get scores. They also have update leaderboard, then they also have draw leaderboard. So those are going to be our functions that we're going to actually create in our leaderboard file. And so eventually they're going to have us doing that. So let's make sure we're not getting ahead of ourselves. So we're just going to go ahead and paste this code in there. The one thing that they do mention here too before we move on to the next thing is you should replace spot with the name you gave your turtle. So let's go back in here and let's see, what did I actually have my turtle as? So I did have him as spot. If you guys use Painter, right, for the actual turtle that you're clicking on, then you'd want to replace a spot here with Painter, and then make sure that if you use spot in here at all, such as like right there and there, that you're replacing that with your actual turtle name. Anyways, let's go ahead, let's continue. So why are the variables preceded by the keyword global? So yeah, as we were talking about, the global keyword tells the program that these variables are the same ones that were already defined in the main program. So anytime that we have a function that is being used, we have to actually pass in variables into that function. If you don't want to have to pass in certain variables to the function and ensure that they're recognized basically outside of the functions, inside of the functions, we can end up using the global keyword. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's continue to step number 5 here. In the countdown section, add the manage leaderboard function call shown in red to the end of the if segment. So in the countdown function, we're going to end up adding in this code. Now notice that they do have else in there, so we got to keep that in mind. So countdown function, let's see here, so let's do, oh, there it is. So they have in this countdown function, we want to end up adding this. Now let's see here, if timer, I don't know why that came in, some formatting issue, it's less than or equal to 0, so we have the counter right, timer up is true, and then we have the manage leaderboard. Now this else statement should also end up being in there. Now just as you can see, this is the code we just copied in. It's basically we're just adding in that manage leaderboard function call. Now else, we can end up just taking this previous code, and so now we have it where it's going to continue, right, to execute this function. So all we were doing is we were just adding the manage leaderboard call into that. Okay, so to save yourself time while testing the code, they say change the timer variable from 30 seconds to just 5 seconds. Yes, absolutely agreed. We definitely need to end up doing that. Let's do Control F, timer. I mean, you can even make this, I probably should have just went up. You could even make it where it's 3 seconds just to speed things up a bit more. So we're gonna end up going 3 seconds. So save this version of your code. So we're gonna go ahead and save this. So this is up to step 6. So let's do Control S. Then I'm gonna do Control Shift S. We can go step 6, right? And so I'm gonna save that. Now I am just backing that up. I'm still gonna go back to our 121 code, and so that was this one. So we're gonna go back into there, but we at least have the backed up code up until step 6, so we got that saved. All right, let's continue. So create a new text file in the same folder where your game resides. Make sure to name it a122 leaderboard.txt. This file is empty for now, so as you all can see, I actually have this file in here. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna delete that file, and I'll show you how we can create the new file. Just as we were talking about with new Python files, we end up doing Control N. It's going to be basically the same thing. We can paste this in here. It says a122 underscore leaderboard.txt. Now why do I paste that in there? So that whenever I save it, it's going to automatically populate with that file name and extension that we want. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. Now this is where you got to be very careful. You want to select all and then delete that, and then press Control S again, so that it'll save that text file. Now keep in mind, if we go in, we try to read this text file, obviously it's going to be blank. Okay, so keep that in mind. So file is empty for now. Expect an error. If you test your game at this point in the process, we're going to receive errors. Exactly right. These errors will be resolved as you proceed with your work on the module in the following sections. So the leaderboard module, this is where we're going to actually create our custom module. So far in this course, you have imported Python modules such as Turtle and the random modules to enhance your code. Using imported modules is one way to abstract code in programming. If we end up clicking on this, you can end up seeing what that link or what that definition is. So abstraction, a technique or process that manages complexity in a program or computer system. Abstraction hides details or removes duplication, allowing the programmer to focus on high-level considerations and functions rather than the rules of the programming language. Just as we talked about, the Turtle module, for instance, that is a Python file that is, I wod say, probably at least 500 lines of code. All right, so it's definitely more than 500 lines of code. But even for the trtl.turtle with a capital T, right, to create an instance of Turtle, the amount of lines of code that has is insane, right? And so that's how we're using abstraction in this class so far. And what we're going to try to do is create that same abstraction with our leaderboard module. So add to your notes, they have data abstraction, manages complexity in a program, summarize the following ways you can use abstraction in your programs. And so that's what I want you guys to be thinking about, right? Especially with the leaderboard custom module that we're about to create. So take some time, reflect on that. Once you've done that, go ahead, feel free to come on back. So you will work on your custom module specific to the leaderboard functionality. You will do this by placing your functions in another file. The import statement you added earlier will make these functions be available within our Catch a Turtle program code. So create a new file in Visual Studio Code named leaderboard.py. And what we're going to do is save it in the same folder where our game code resides. This file will be your custom Python module for maintaining a leaderboard. And so what we can end up doing is, let's go pop back into here. And so I have the leaderboard where it's the backup file. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to press Control N, and I'm going to create this as leaderboard.py. I'm going to press Control S to save that. As you can see, it automatically populates our file name and file extension. Great, we've got it. Now let's go ahead, let's move on to the next step. What they want us to do is to take this code, copy and paste that. So let's make sure that we're reading the instructions so that we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves here. So they want us to copy that code, paste it into our leaderboard module, and explore the module. Some functions are already written for us, while others you will need to add or modify it in the following steps. Great. So it's very nice. They do end up providing us with the code. You might be thinking like this is pretty daunting, right? But thankfully they do give us that code. And so now what we've got is this leaderboard.py file. Now they have it where there's the levels of scoring. They also have, as we were talking about, those functions that we need. So get names. So that's going to get the names of all of our files. Keep in mind, check out how they're doing this. They have the leaderboard file. This is option 1 of how to read files, right? So they have it where it's open, file name. We have it as R, so we're just reading to that, right? In no way are we actually going to be able to write to that file because of the fact that we use the mode R to open this file. So what they want us to then do is we're going to use the names, right? So use a for loop to iterate through the content of the file one line at a time. Note that each line in the file has the format leader name, comma, leader score. Keep in mind too, they forgot to mention that there's also this guy right here, which is going to create the new line. So this is going to be where our name is. There's going to be a comma, and then it's going to be the leader score. Keep that in mind. Also keep this in mind right here too. So let's go ahead, let's continue here. What they have is the names is an empty list already automatically. What I'm thinking is that they're going to end up having us create a list of those names, right? So to do one, use a while loop to read the leader name and then add the player name. We're not going to go into this just yet because we're just checking out the overall file, but then we're going to close that. Okay. Then we've got to return the names list. So instead of this being that blank list, we're going to actually type in return names just like that. And because that's going to be the names list that we're creating there. Let's also take a look at this. This is to get the scores. And so this is going to be very similar to how we're getting the names, except we're going to be getting the scores this time around. So we're going to get everything that is past that comma, right? And so they have the leader score. This is going to be the actual value. I'm guessing we're going to have to come back to that. I was guessing that that's going to be the current score, but we'll see. Index is 0. They have it where we use a while loop to index beyond the comma, skipping the player's name. There's also use a while loop to get the score and then add the player's score to the scores list, and then we can close this. I'm also going to be showing you guys a very efficient method to be able to do this as well. Obviously, they want us to be able to use that while loop and the for loops for the get names and get scores, but there is a very more effective way to be able to do this. And then they've got it where we're closing the file, and then they say return the scores in place of the empty list. And so scores, instead of this, is going to be the empty list. It's going to be scores there. Okay. Now this is the actual update leaderboard. So by inserting the current player and score to the list at the correct position, so they got the update leaderboard, we have all these parameters here that we end up using, and so they have this to do for us as well. And so they have some of that stuff commented out. And then finally, just as we were talking about, there's also the draw leaderboard there too. And so those are those 4 main events that are going to be happening with the leaderboard module. So keep in mind, because we're defining functions, this is going to allow us to, back in our main file, right? Back in this file, it's going to allow us to call certain functions that are from our actual leaderboard module, custom module that we have there. So just like in here, the update leaderboard, that's literally calling the update leaderboard right here. And so it's going to execute whatever action this is. Okay. So let's go ahead, let's get back to the eText and let's continue. So what are the 3 functions in this module, and what is each function designed to do? That's exactly what we just ended up talking about, right? So you can check that out. It's going to be get names. So that's 1. There's also get scores, which is 2. There's also update leaderboard, which is 3. And then there's also draw leaderboard, which is 4. So That's what I was thinking. We were just talking about how there's 4 different functions, so I think that they meant 4 different functions. And so you can go ahead and write that down in your computer science notebook, what each of those 4 end up doing. Okay. So it's time to test our code. The program should ask you to enter a name in the terminal. Remember, we made the better update where it's not asking us in the terminal. It's actually just going to ask us in that window. So they want us to test the code, and yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very good thing to test your code as you're going throughout. Now, we do have the leaderboard.py file, so let's go ahead. Let's make sure that I've saved this. I'm going to press Control S, and so we have the leaderboard file as LB. So let's go ahead and run this. Let's put in the name, Mr. Rainbolt. Let's play the game. So now we got the timer, 2, 3. All right, so we ended up getting that. The timer is up. Has anything else happened? No, it is not. And so we haven't actually created those functions just yet in the leaderboard module, and so that's why, you know, nothing else is happening. But so far, everything does look good for what we have created. Okay, so they say that there's no such file or directory error, so double check to make sure that you are working in the same folder as your Catch a Turtle program. So yeah, just as we said, we're in 122, right? We have all these different folders. Remember, if you run into that issue, you can go to open folder. If you're on the Windows computer, I think it is just open is what, all right, it should still be open folder. But anyways, look for that option, and then you should be in the 122 folder. You should create a 122 folder in there, your 121 final code, as well as the 122 leaderboard, as well as our leaderboard.py file. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'll probably just do this. Let me create a new folder. I'm going to do backup just to make this a little bit more simple for you guys. So this is our backed up code there. I'm going to move that. This is also my previous code. I'm going to move that too. My leaderboard backup, I'm also going to move that into here. This was my main file. I'm also going to move that back into here. And then this was just the reading files in Python that I was showing you guys at the very beginning of this. So I'm going to move that into here. And so now this is all what you should have for 122. It's your final code from 121, the leaderboard.txt file, and the leaderboard Python file, which is our custom module. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's continue. So record any errors that we encounter. Remember to include a description in your own word of why the error occurs and how to fix it. Hopefully we'll start running into some errors soon so that you guys can end up getting some practice and seeing, you know, given an error, how we can troubleshoot that a bit. But we've been moving along pretty well so far. So the load leaderboard function, that's what we're going to start off with first in our leaderboard.py file. So let's go ahead, let's get ready to begin. Reading data from a file using Python can be quite simple. Exactly as we were just showing, there's those 2 methods. Your program is going to have to open the file, load its data line by line into a list, which that should be screaming to you right now. We're going to be using the .readLines function that we were talking about at the beginning of this. We're going to also process that data as you wish, and then we've got to close the file. So, awesome. Your code will add the leaderboard data into a text file 1 line at a time using the following format: name 1, comma, score 1. Then we go on to the next, and then the next, right? The get names and get scores function are responsible for loading the leaderboard data into the names and scores list. So what they want us to do is take a closer look at the get names function. Can you tell what the open function does? Just as we were talking about, it's going to open the actual file, right? So they kind of give you some literature here on what all that entails, but we did talk about that. So let's go back to our get names function. And this is in our leaderboard custom module, right? So get names, so that's where we're at. We just open up this leaderboard file. We're going to just read it. We're going to end up having in here, use a for loop to iterate through the contents of the file 1 line at a time. Note that each line in the file has the format leader name, comma, leader score, and then \n. So we got the names. What I'm going to do is we're going to go to this next one so that we're not getting ahead of ourselves here. So when the open function is called with the parameter r for reading, it opens the file and reads the contents and returns a series of strings that represent the contents. Specifically, each line of the file is 1 string, and the strings are returned in a list. For example, if the leaderboard text file contains the following entries, then the list returned from the open statement will contain 3 string elements. And so what I can do is we can actually let's condense these other functions here just to keep everything a bit simple. And so what I can do is right here at this point, I can unindent. Now, as we were saying, this is a module that we're trying to use, right? However, this module, we can still test this module to ensure that it works within our file here. And so what I can do, just for testing purposes, right? We're gonna end up deleting this at the end. But what I can do is I can actually call the get names. And so just as we had in this function here, we're gonna actually load that leaderboard file, right? And so they want the file name from us, and that has to be passed in as an argument, right? That's gonna assign that argument, whatever we pass in. If it's the A122 underscore leaderboard.txt, it's gonna assign that to this parameter of being file name. And so what I can do is I can actually put in here, let's say for instance, let's just start off with this. Let's print leaderboard file. Okay, so this is just gonna see what we're dealing with here. So let's go down here. I'm gonna call this function just to test it, right? We're gonna see what ends up getting passed in here. A122 underscore leaderboard.txt. So now let's go ahead, let's run this leaderboard file. Now, as we can see here, we've got it where it is loading just as this, right? So what I'm gonna do in here is I'm gonna make a little bit of a difference on this. I'm going to end up putting at the end, or what we can also do is we can do this lines equals and then leaderboard dot file dot read lines. And so now let's test this out. And so we got lines here. Now let's go here, let's print this. And so it's blank, right? Now why is that? It's because there's nothing actually in there yet, okay? So that's what we were testing out. What I also want to end up seeing, if we just keep this, what if I end up printing line in here? Okay, so we can do that too. So let's print line. Let's also put in here Shelly, comma 5, Tim, comma 3, Mel, comma 1. Let's leave it like that. I'm gonna press Control S to save that. Let's test this out too. Let's see if this works. Okay, perfect. So if we actually do end up using this method, then that works, right? Where we can iterate through that. So let's keep that in mind. Let's go ahead, let's pop back into here. And so they have those entries, perfect, we've got it. And so list indexing. So let's go ahead, let's continue with this. So far you have used list to either choose a random value, like turtle color or size, just as we were talking about, or to iterate through its values using a for loop. However, there's a lot more to a list than we have seen. So in terms of lists, excuse me, a list is an ordered collection of elements, right? So this is the first element, second element, third element. Now there's 3 elements in there. In terms of our indexing though, it starts at 0, then it goes 1, and then it goes 2. So we can add to this list, just as we were talking about, by using the .append, right? And then what we can do is we can reference colors, we can do colors .append, and then you could append whatever element it is that we want to put in there. So for instance, let's say that we have brown in here. If we do colors.append brown, it's going to end up changing that list instead of being red, green, blue to be red, green, blue, brown. Okay, so to access a single element in a list, we can use square brackets, and then we can specify the actual index, right? The list index. And so we've talked about that in class, where if we do colors bracket 0, that's going to end up returning red for us. If we do colors bracket and then 1, it's going to be green. Colors bracket 3, well, if we end up appending brown to it, that'll end up being brown. Now, if we end up doing colors bracket 5 and we reference the 5th index, that's actually going to give us an index out of range error, because basically that index doesn't exist, right? We'd have to append another color to our colors list for that index to exist. So list procedures are implemented in accordance with the syntax rules of the programming language. For us, it's Python, right? And so they kind of just go through this. They talk about this. So in this case, animal, we're looking at the animals list. This is the 2nd index. Remember, the element is 1 greater than this, right? So for instance, if I'm referencing index 2, that's going to be the 3rd element, because index always starts with 0, right? So index 0 is dog, this is 1, this is 2. So this is going to print out mouse on here. So just as we can see there, mouse. Now if I put in 3, it's going to give us bird. If I put in 4, it's going to give us monkey. So let's put in 4. And then just as we were talking about, if I put in 5 here, that's going to end up giving us this error over here that's going to say list index out of range. So just exactly like that. Now, why does that occur? It's because there's no fifth index in this list, right? However, let's say that we append to this animals list dot append, then we can end up putting in here, let's say rabbit, right? Oops, tried saving that, yikes. So let's go ahead, we appended rabbit. Now, will we get a list index out of range error here? No, because now at the very, very end of this, there's rabbit, okay? So if you end up getting the list index out of range, that's because you are referencing an index that doesn't exist. And so that's going to be something that you're going to be encountering during this project. So run the code, see what happens. We talked about what happens and what ends up occurring here. What if you wanted your code to print out the element monkey? So just as we were saying, let's take out this line here. If we want to print out monkey, we would end up referencing that fourth index because monkey is the fifth element, but is the fourth index because index starts at 0. So we'd end up just referencing 4 there, okay? They end up talking about exactly what we were just saying here. This is something that's very important to know. Anytime that you end up taking the College Board exam, the AP exam, anytime they're establishing a variable, they're going to end up using this little back arrow. So this is basically the equivalent of x equals. Now, this is where you got to be careful as well. They end up having, so x is equal to a list and then brackets I. In the College Board AP exam, this is the silliest thing ever, right? They'll usually call this out where they'll tell you index starts at 1, but that is the case for College Board's index for their list. It doesn't start at 0, it starts at 1. So for Python, starts at 0. For the AP exam, whenever you take that, the index starts at 1. They will tell you that though in the problem statement, but just make sure that you're remembering that, okay? And I know that it's very, very silly. I don't know why they have it like that. Yeah, I wish that AP Classroom or AP College Board, that they would just end up using the Python programming language for like as their basis, but they don't, because a lot of the AP Computer Science Principal classes, they'll actually use other programming languages in those classes. So sometimes like they'll literally use Blockly if you take this class at a different school. But anyways, we use Python. So now this next part, step 15, review the code below without running it. Can you guess what this code will print? Try to take a guess what this is going to end up printing out, okay? So what we did here in this line is it's basically saying 0, 1, 2, the second element, or sorry, the second index, the third element of this list is going to now be equal to horse instead of mouse. So if we end up running this, you can end up seeing that it changes. Instead of it being equal to mouse for our second index, it is equal to horse, okay? So that kind of gives you some guidance as well on how we can end up changing our entries, right, for our names in the leaderboard list file, okay? So run the code above to see what happens. So we talked about what we observed. What if we want to change the element dog to be woof? Well, what we could end up doing here is we'd put in 0, and then we could put a good old wolf in there, right? And so now if we run this, you'll end up seeing it's going to change that to be woof. All right, perfect. They also talk about the College Board connection here. They end up having where we end up putting this exactly down right here. So they have it where a list, so if it's animal list, it'd be the same thing, except there's just that arrow going backwards. And then X is the actual value that we're going to put in there, okay? So anyways, run the code below and observe the result. Can you tell what caused the error? So if we end up running this, just as we were talking about, list index out of range. Why is the list index out of range? Well, it's because we are referencing an index that is not included in our range, right? The current index range, or the range of values we could use for our index, is anywhere from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4. So anywhere from 0 to 4 with both of those numbers included, we can end up using that. So if I put in 5, that's out of the range of values we could use, okay? So that's exactly what they're talking about here. So let's go ahead and let's move on here. So use list indexing to get player data. So to get started extracting names and scores from the leaderboard.txt file, look at the for loop header in the get names and get scores functions in your leaderboard.py file. So what they have here for line and leaderboard file, what is this going to end up doing? That's going to end up iterating through each line, right? And it's going to assign each line to be the line variable. Okay, so what is this loop header doing? Just as we said, it's going to print out, like if we print line, for instance, on each iteration, it's going to print out that line. All right, now they have parallel lists. So to complete each function, you will need to add code in the body of the for loops to get each player's name and their score. So get names. What we want to do is extract the player name, which occurs before the comma. Then we want to add it to the names list. For the get scores, we want to extract the player score, which occurs after the comma and before the end of the line. We also want to add that to the scores list. Okay, so the names list and scores list are parallel lists. Each item in a specific location in one list is going to correlate to the item in the same location of the other list. For example, the name at index 0 is going to be the same score that's also at index 0, right, in the scores list. So the name at index 1 in names is going to be that same score that's in index 1 of the scores list, so on and so forth. All right, so extract player's name. So this is where we're going to start getting into some fun stuff here. I had a terrible crack there on my fingers. That was honestly kind of embarrassing. I was hoping that there would be a good crack. Anyways, extract player name. So the following steps guide you through extracting the names and the scores. You will use the to-do numbers and comments in the leaderboard.py file to guide us on where we need to make our modifications. So first, you will add code to this section to loop through the line or the string stored in line, which contains a line from the leaderboard text file. You will loop one character at a time, join or concatenate the characters. Just as we were saying, if we concatenate a string, it means we're adding those two strings together, we're joining those two strings together, and then we're going to store the result in the names list variable. Now what they end up having here is, note, lists and strings are similar whenever it comes to indexing. So just as we had the index of 0 for a list, it's going to be the same thing where we can reference the index of 0 of a string as well. The index of 0 of a string is going to literally be that first letter that we have, right? So not only are we going to be iterating through the actual lines that is a list, we're going to also be iterating through each line as a string, and we're going to iterate through each of those characters, okay? So keep in mind here, we want to end up getting the name first, right? And so just as we were saying, what's that specific format for the name? If you go in here, the name occurs, and then the end of the name is denoted by this comma, right? So we can end up using an if statement in here to be able to find out what that name is, all right? So let's go back in here. So find the comment with to do one and add the following code to our program. So they're guiding this for us quite a bit, right? Think through how the loop will execute. There's a short video to show you the looping process. So note, whenever you add code to your program, pay attention to the indentation of the block statements to avoid errors. This is actually something I caught myself on earlier. I actually have it currently in my VS Studio Code where it's just double spaces for indentation. So I tried using that tab function and it ended up indenting too far. So let's go ahead, let's take this. So we've got this. So this is under to do one, right? And so we're going to go ahead and go into to do one. And so that's where we're at here. We're going to go ahead and paste this. Let's make sure that our formatting is all good here. So we got the indentation correct. Yep. And so while the line index is not equal to this, where it's not equal to a comma, right, we're going to end up adding onto the leader name. Remember, we can also end up taking this out. Whoa, let me control Z that real quick. We can also take this out. Remember, all we're doing is we're adding the line index to this. So the shorthand of this as well as you could do this. And then what we've got to do is we've got to increment the index, right? And so we're just going through each line and we're going to check out the index, right? We're going to refer to the index. Index first is equal to 0. So what this is going to do, for instance, it'll go to this first line, right? So right out here, for line and leaderboard file, we're going to first be focusing on this line. Then the leader name is equal to a blank string. We're going to have the index set to 0, and then we're going to say while the line, the index that we're referencing in that line, where index is equal to 0 on the first iteration, right? So it's going to be first equal to s there. So while s is not equal to comma, is that the case? Yeah, s is not equal to comma. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to add on that s to the leader name, right? And then we're going to increment the index by 1. So then now we're referencing the first index of this line. It's going to be h, right? And so previously we had the leader name, just that capital S. Well, now what we're going to do is we're going to add in h to that, and then we're going to increment the index, okay? Now, once we have that entire thing set up, right, this is going to continue executing until that becomes where this is false, right? Where the current character that we are calling on, that is going to be equal to the comma. And so after that point, what we can end up doing is we can take the leader name and we can append that to our names list, right? So we started off where we had a blank list for names. And now what we can do is we can append this full name to that. Now keep in mind, we do not want to do this. So if I end up going in here, 1, 2, and I indent that so that it's in the while loop, we do not want that, because once this condition has executed to be false, that's whenever we're going to stop the while loop, and what we're going to be left with is the actual leader name, okay? So what they also have is, after we've iterated through the entire file, we're going to end up getting the leaderboard file. We're going to close that. And then what we're doing at the very, very end of this is we're returning the names list in place of the empty list, okay? So now, just as we were doing before, we were calling this function within that module, right? So if I run this code right now, although we're in the module, because I'm calling that function, it's going to actually return names to this. And so what I can do here is I can put a parenthesis at the end there, and then I can type in print so that it will print the names, right? So this is how we can do that check. So let's make sure that we satisfied all these conditions. Now we had it in here where we are printing out the line, so let's also take that out, right? But because we were printing out the line, it went through and it printed, oh my gosh, what did I just do? I got no idea. Let's X that out and let's try running again. So I'm in the terminal here. So just as we did in the previous instance, it went through and it printed out each of those lines for us, right? But at the end, what we were returning was that list. And so since I deleted that code to print out each line, now you can see that we're just getting returned the list of names. Now, is that correct? Yes. Let's try this out too. Let's put in good old Sally. She crashed out on the game. She ended up getting no points. Let's test it out. Let's make sure that this is going to update. I'm going to press Control S on my leaderboard text file. Let's try to run this code again. Now, as you can see, we also have Sally in there. Okay, so is our code working for this first function? Yes, it is. Great. Guess what I can do now? I can take this line by pressing Control L. So Control L is how you select the entire line. We can delete that line because we don't want to actually be calling that function in our custom module. Okay, so now, did we end up doing that correctly? Yes, absolutely we did. So they also have the test for inequality. So remember, this is not equals to. So if something is not equal to, then it would be, if true. So if x mod 2 is not equal to 0, then what that would tell us is that x is odd. If x mod 2 is equal to 0, then that would mean that x is even. Okay, so they just end up providing that. They do end up giving you this little video here that you can end up watching, and that's going to show you how we are actually looping through this. So if you're like, Mr. Rainbolt, I still don't really understand what's happening there, please do watch that video. The video does not have sound though, so keep that in mind. Anyways, computer science notebook, want you all to reflect on this, make sure that you're answering in this. So explain what is happening in each line of code as it executes. As we were talking about, we are not only going through each line in this text file, but we're also going through each character in the line. And so whenever it is a comma, that basically tells us, hey, that's the end of the name. And so we're going to go ahead and append that full entire name to our names list. Okay? So which character will index be pointing at when the loop ends? It will be the case where that's pointing at the comma, right? The index of the comma. So follow these steps to test your code so far. So they have add a few data entries to that, and then make sure you save the file. They end up having, so they have important, use the correct format when adding the values, name and score. So yeah, we have that. Include a blank line at the end of the file to indicate the end of the data. This is usually where most students end up crashing out. They do not read that line right there, and so they don't have the blank line, and then they end up running into this error while they're testing out their code. So make sure you're doing that. Refer to the sample contents. So they have this where you can end up putting that in there. I actually put in my own values, right? And so, you know, you can end up using those, or you can put in your own. The current code does not show you what the leader names being extracted are, so we ended up coming up with a simple line of code so that we could end up seeing that. And so we tested that out. And then they have it where we switch back to the Catch a Turtle program and test the game. So check the values printed in the terminal. Are they correct? If not, check your code again and fix any errors. So now we were showing how you could test it in the leaderboard. Let's go back and let's test it out here in our actual code. And so I'm gonna go through here. I'm gonna start just taking out some of these because these are in my backup file, and I don't want to have these other files opened up in here because it's just going to kind of make everything a bit more chaotic, if you will. So we're going to go ahead and take these out. So welcome screen, you got to go too, buddy. All right. So now we're in our main code for 121. So let's go ahead. Let's type this in, Mr. Rainbolt. And so now let's run this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom. Okay. Nice. We end up having this times up. I also ended up seeing down here we had some stuff printing out. Oh, such as list index out of range. We're going to have to check that out and see. So this is in where? Let's go above this though first. Let's test this out. So Mr. Rainbolt, that was printed, right? We have that. Now they are giving us this error. Now, as you can see, there's line 1968. This is in the tkinter module, which is actually how Turtle operates. Later on, we're going to be talking about the tkinter module as well, which is a graphical user interface module used in Python. But obviously, that's not the error we want to look at. There's also line 862. I don't even have 862 lines in here. But then we end up coming up with this. We get this error in line 71 in countdown. And so this is the manage leaderboard function. And if we keep going down in here, we can see what that specific issue is. So this is in the draw leaderboard function. They're giving us this issue, right? So it's in line 58 in manage leaderboard. It's in the draw leaderboard function, and that's line 95 in our leaderboard.py file. And so if we go in here, we can look at line 91. Now, as you can see, we haven't even talked about the draw leaderboard function yet. And so of course it's going to end up giving us an error. Because, you know, we aren't passing all this stuff in here just yet. So totally fine that we ended up getting this error. Totally fine. So they also have insert a line of code for to do two at the leader to add the leader name that we just extracted from the line to the list of leader names. So yeah, we already ended up doing that. So sorry guys, we ended up kind of jumping the gun here for that. So we've got the leader name there, and we've added it to the list of the leader names. Now they start talking to us about extracting the player score. Okay, so to extract the score from the line of data, you need to index to the first character of the score. So in the get scores function at to do 3, add a while loop to index to the comma character in line. So currently the character at line index is the comma. So let's go ahead, let's take a look at this. We're going to go to the get scores, and let me go ahead, I'm going to collapse this too so we can keep things organized here. I'm going to also collapse the draw leaderboard function. Now we got get scores, and so now we have it where we've got this to do 3. So use a while loop to index beyond the comma, skipping the player's name. So many different ways you can end up going about this. All right, towards the end, or maybe even in class, I want to show you guys a shortcut that's going to make your life even a whole lot easier. But let's go ahead, let's follow the rules for now. So use a while loop to index beyond the comma, skipping the player's name. So index is 0. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put while, and then now what I'm going to do is line and then index, right? And so we can end up referencing that particular index. Now in our while loop, we need to end up incrementing index, right? So we're going to say while line index is not equal to comma. Okay, now let's put that in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put index plus equals 1. So now let's go ahead, let's do this. We're going to put a print statement in here. Actually, we're going to do that before we increment index so that you guys can end up seeing what's actually happening here. So I'm going to call line and then index, and then we're going to print that out. So now, just as we were saying, the get scores function, we can end up calling that, and we can do like a little test here, right? So get scores, and then we can end up passing in here a122 underscore leaderboard.txt. Now let's make sure, oops, .txt. Let's ensure that I have that correct file. Okay, nice, yeah. So let's go ahead and let's run this. We're going to call this function. Now, just as you can see here, the while loop, it's printing these out, right? But then after we reach the comma, it's not printing out anymore. And so what we just did is we determined the index that the comma occurs at. So let's do this. Let's take this line out. What I'm going to do outside of this while loop is down here on to do for, I'm going to print index. Now, what is this going to end up giving us? This is going to give us the index that the comma occurs for each of these lines. So let's run this. We've got 6, 3, 3, and then 5. Let's go to our text file. This is going to be different for you, right? Based off of what you actually have as your names written in there. This is particular to mine, right? I've got it where it's Shelly. What index is this? 0 in that list. Then we've got 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is where that comma occurs. Let's go down to Tim. For Tim, T, that's 0. Then we've got 1, 2, and then 3 is where that comma occurs. So you guys can see the current index that we're on is actually where that comma occurs. So now let's go back to our custom module, the leaderboard custom module here. What they want us to do is use a while loop to get the score. So now what can I do? Well, if the index is occurring at comma, what I want to do is I want to actually increment the index one more time. That's going to allow us to actually get that number that's in there. And now, just as we said, at the end of each line, what that actually is going to be a \n. Now, I want to show you all something, okay? \n, those are 2 characters, right? Now, what I'm curious about is Python going to read that as 2 characters, or is it going to be 1 character? That's what we need to determine here. So let's use a while loop to get the score. What I'm going to first do is I'm going to do while, and then I'm going to put in here index not equal to, and then we're going to put in \n. Let's just try that right there. So we're going to do, and we need to also make sure that we're calling the actual line, and then that index. So while it's not equal to that, what I want to do is I want to have, so leader score right here, we're going to end up appending to that. So leader score, and I'm not going to actually append, we're going to concatenate. So plus equals, now remember this is being read as a string type, right? So plus equals, and then we're going to put in here line and then index, okay? Now, what I'm thinking is after this, outside of that while loop, we can end up putting in here print, and then I can print out leader score, okay? So let's test this out. Let's try this out. As we said, we're going to call this get names function, or sorry, not get names, get scores function, and then we're going to end up seeing what's printed out in here, okay? Let's see if our code is working correctly. So we called it, and nothing is happening. Oh my gosh. So what I'm noticing is that while we were testing this out, while it is not equal to that, if it's not equal to that, it's just going to keep adding on. It's going to keep adding on. It's going to keep adding on. So let's try this out. Let's do the \. Now it's running into an issue. Let's do this. what is another way we can end up going through this? I want to end up, let's tell you what, let's do this. Let's put in this. What I want to do is I want to print out, let's print in here. Let's print line index, and let's see what this is equal to. What I'm curious about is what is this equal to at the very end. What I'm going to also put in here is an input statement so that we don't see like tons of stuff just printed out, tons of indentations here. So 5 is what we ended up first getting. Now I'm going to press enter. So it's 5 again, 5 again, 5 again. Now what are we printing out here? So we're printing the line index. And so we have, while it's not equal to 5, we're going to call on that index. Oh, what do we do? Well, we made a very silly mistake, right? What did we not do? We did not increment the index. Most of y'all are probably watching this video and you're like, Mr. Rainbolt, that was a silly mistake. Yes, it was. So let's go ahead. Let's run through this. Let's go ahead. Let's run. So we got 5. Now, what we're looking for is what is the next thing that's printed out, because that's going to tell us how we can determine if there's a jump or not. So, okay, nice. We ended up having where it's 3. So let's see, is that what our score was? 5, 3. Okay, let's try this again. 1, 0. Perfect. That's exactly what we had there. So let's try this out now. So let's do this. Instead of, let's take out this input statement. And then what I want to do is I want to actually append after this. Instead of printing that leader score, I want to append to our scores list. So I would do scores dot append, and then we're going to append that leader score. Now, this is where we're going to be kind of careful. What I'm thinking in terms of the data type of that score, do we want to keep it as a string or do we want to change it to an integer? We're going to probably end up having to take a look at the update leaderboard function to see what type of data types we're expecting. We'll also check out the etext to see if they give us any information. For instance, should we change this to be an integer for each of those so that we have a list of integers for our score? I'm expecting that that's the case. However, we want to double check and make sure. Anyways, what I want to do is I want to actually test this out. And so I want to end up printing out the scores here. If we're returning scores from the getScores function, if I just do print, I can print out that variable that is returned from that function. And so it'll print out our scores. And so as we have here 5, 3, 1, and 0. So 5, 3, 1, 0. Let's have some fun with this. Let's change it just to check everything out. We're going to say that Mel actually killed it. Shelly also killed it. Tim, they all did pretty good. Sally even. She had 0 on the first one. She ended up getting 1 this time around. So let's just test this out and let's run this just to see. So did this increment? Yes. Now, if it did not end up changing these values or this output, make sure that you are saving. So I press Control S on that. You do need to save that text file. So we can run it again. We got 7541. So now, is this returning everything really well? Yes. Now, one of the things that we said that we need to kind of like look at is later on, we're going to see, does this need to be an integer? If I change this to be an int, check this out. If I run this, do you see how it's no longer string data types in there? So that's one of the things we want to keep in mind. Should this be an int or string? So I'm gonna save that. Now what we can do, check this, and then what we can do is later on we can do Control F so we can check that. All right. So we ended up basically just cranking this out. So we end up going through here. The new line character, as we talked about, that's how we represent a new line. And so this is exactly what we ended up using that we put in there. Now they have the to do 5. They say use the in function as you add the score to the list. So perfect. We ended up just wrapping this up, right? We found out, okay, it should be an integer. So now we can erase that comment because we were directed to make that an integer. And then they have add the print statement after the while loop or after you append the scores, and test your code to make sure you are extracting the names and scores correctly. It's exactly what we just did. They said that we should get a string index out of range error, or if you end up getting the error, then it is likely due to an ill formatted text file. So just as we were talking about, should be the case where your text file has this new line. If it doesn't, if it looks like this, you're going to run into an index out of range error. Okay, so perfect, we have got it. So I'm going to control S, we got that saved. The return statement. So the return statement at the end of every function, we always want to return the values, right? The get names, it's returning to us the actual names list, right? The get scores function, it's returning a list of all the scores, right? To be able to pass back values from functions, you have to use return, okay? Now, they have name, input. Let's hear, you may have not realized it yet, but you have already used return statements when you called the input function. So the input function is going to return whatever string we end up inputting, right? So very good. So this is just talking about the data types. It's a nice little review. If we return hello in quotes, that's going to be a string. If we return 10, that's going to be an integer. If we return this, it's going to be an entire list. Remember, you can also replace this where it's actually a variable that is equal to a list. You can also return true. If we were talking about that, the data type of that would be a Boolean value. If we return my variable, my underscore variable, it would be whatever data type we have assigned to the my variable variable. Okay, now College Board connection, they'll end up having this return, and then they have the expression there. So they use that notation to represent a return statement. So keep that in mind. They have the parentheses. In Python, you don't need the parentheses. Okay, so you will use return statements in the get names and get scores. We already did that. We're returning those lists, right? And so now what we're doing in the manage leaderboard function, it's going to actually end up calling our leaderboard custom module, right? And it's going to do the get names. And since we're returning the names list from the get names function, it's going to assign our names that we created to be the leader names list variable, right? And so now, just for instance, in here, we talked about how the names, it's going to be Shelly, Tim, Mel, and Sally. So if that's what our leaderboard text file says, then whenever we assign it to this, the leaderboard underscore names underscore list is going to be equal to those lists of the names. Same thing for their corresponding scores too. Okay, so College Board connection, the value of a procedure. So the College Board uses result equals, and then they have the procedure name, and then they have certain arguments we can pass into there, right? Now keep in mind, remember guys, this is the biggest thing that people end up messing up on. If we call a function, what we pass into that function is an argument. Whenever you define a function, right, you're creating the function. That's what they have here. For us in Python, it's define, and then we have proc name, right, procedure name. Those are called procedures, or sorry, not procedures, parameters is what we assign those to be. Okay, so those are the actual values that those arguments become, our parameters. Okay, so to assign to result, the value of a procedure being returned by calling, so they have that in there, and then they end up showing us the return too. All right, now at to do 6 in get names, the function currently returns an empty list with return brackets. We already actually modified that, so we're good, we're ahead of the game. Same thing here for step 27. Test your program now that you have extracted the names and scores and return their respective lists to the calling program. The leaderboard displays. Let's end up running our code. Let's see what we come up with. As we said before, we're going to probably run into some errors, right? And so that is totally a-okay. What I also want to end up doing is, with these values, I want to print these out. I want to test this out. Leader names list, leader scores list. Let me pop back in here so you can see that's what I just wrote out. We're going to test and see if this prints out in the terminal that correct data. Okay, so let's go ahead. We should end up having it though, where it's Sally, Tim, all of our friends that are in our leaderboard list, and then their scores should show up. Now, whoa, check it out. Bug in the code right down here with this little turtle guy. Bug in the code, so we're gonna have to figure that out. But as you can see, Shelly, she's in there 7. Tim also is in there with 5 points. Mel's in there with 4, and then Sally's in there with 1 point. We also had this stuff printed out right here, where that was the names. Then we have the scores. Perfect. This is looking really, really good. However, if you were taking note, I scored 5, so I need to be up here with Tim. Either I need to take the place of Tim and then he pops down, or Tim's going to be up there and then I'm going to go below him, right? Because we basically tied. So that's the one thing that we got to check out. Also, that turtle, too, that's kind of moving there. We got to see what's happening with him, too. All right, but anyways, I'm going to take out this print statement because everything looks pretty good there. All right, so everything's looking good. Let's go ahead. Let's back up our code to Control-Shift-S. This was up to step, I believe it was step 30. So let's do this. Oop, 29, got ahead of the game. Let's go back into here. Step 30, rename. What did we say? Was that 28 or 29? My old man dementia is coming in here. 28. So rename 28. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pass this into my backup folder just so that we have that. And then I'm still going to use this main file that we've got here. Okay, so all is good. We are killing it. Let's move on to the list method. So let's do a little recap here. How do you create a list? Boom. Right there, we were using that, right? Creates lists and assigns it the values provided. We also can end up assigning within a list. Let's say that we want to end up accessing an element that's from that list. That's at the index 3, which is the 4th element in the list. We could end up doing that. If we also want to change the values of the numbers in there, we can end up setting that equal to that. We can also append values there as well. We can also pop off the last value by doing that. That'll remove the last element from the list, and then we can also just remove any item that's in that list that has that specific element, right? And so let's check this out. So we have the animals list, so they end up telling us even the length of that list is 5 items, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, perfect. So we got it. So that's the length, excuse me. In terms of College Board, whenever you take that AP exam, length, you're going to end up using that function. That's how you can find the length of a list. Now, let's see here, display the length of a string. Now, if we go S equals, let's do this, salutation equals, let's paste that, hi, how are you? Let's do that. Now what we can end up doing here is we can do print length of salutation. Did we spell that correctly, by the way? Salutation. Yes, we did. I gotta make sure that I'm always staying on business, you know. So print length. Oops, tried saving that again, just by habit. I always do that in Trinket. But if we print out the length of salutation, we'd end up finding it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so let's try running this. Perfect, 16. We got it. So we can also do that same thing for the length of a string. Now they have the length of a list or string can be used to loop through a list or a string using a while loop. The loop header will look like the following. So while index is less than the actual length of that index, then we can end up going through and we can increment index and we can see what those values are, right? So inserting into a list, if we wanted to insert into this animals list at the at the 4th, is that 4th index or is that 4th element? We're going to find out. If we want to end up inserting in lion, though, we can end up using the .insert function. So let's take a look and let's see what happened here. So we got dog, cat, mouse, bird, and then in the 4th index, right, because that's the 5th element, we're adding in lion in there. And so now we can do .insert and then print the animal list. So now that's in there. Okay, so very good. Now, I'm already thinking in terms of our code, if we want the top 5, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values in here. If we end up finding out, hey, that lion is inserted in there, right? Of course, this is going to be the case where it's for the actual player name and their score. What we can do is if we find out that the player ends up going in the 4th spot, if we want to end up having it where there's only 5 people at a time, what we can also do is animals list.pop, right? So just imagine that. Then it'll pop off that last value so that we still retain 5 animals in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So I'm just kind of, you know, I'm talking about how we can end up applying this, what we're learning, to our code. Okay, so nice. So we've got that. So now they have the use the interactive code editor below to insert 2 more values in the animal list, one before dog and one after it. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So let's put animals list dot insert. Let's go to 0. That's going to be monkey. So let's put the monkey in there, and then let's do animals list dot insert. Now this is where you got to be careful. This is where you got to be very, very careful. We're going to put 1 in before dog, and then we're going to put 1 in after dog. Now, if monkey is going into there, right, then we're going to end up having where monkey is the 0th index, and then dog is the first index. Now, if I'm trying to put something in after the dog, then it should be the case where we're referencing the second index, right? Because monkey is the 0th, then dog becomes the first index, and then whatever we're trying to put after that would be the third element, which is the second index. So let's put in here shark. So monkey, dog, shark, cat, mouse, bird, lion, monkey again. Oh, I have 2 monkeys in there. Dang it. Monkey is just fun. All right, but anyways, so now we've got that. In terms of College Board, how do you insert into a list? They end up using this syntax here. So insert, all caps, and then they have the actual list that you're inserting, the index that you're inserting that into, or at, and then the actual value you're putting in there. Keep in mind, in terms of the index for College Board exam, starts at 1, okay? So it's going to be slightly different. Now popping from a list, this is what we just were talking about. Let's check out this code. If we put pop, and instead if I put 1 in here, what ends up happening? So we have dog, cat, mouse, bird, monkey initially inputted. Now whenever we look at this, it's dog, mouse, bird, and monkey. So cat ended up getting removed. Why was cat removed? Because cat is the first index, right? It's the second element, but it's the first index. And so that's how that can get removed in there, okay? So what do we observe? That the index 1 was popped out, okay? So try this slightly different code. Notice the new variable used, animal. Oh, okay, so they have the actual animal. That's the first element that's in here. I just popped this element out from the list animal. We could end up using that, and then we're gonna also print out that list after we pop that out. Okay, nice, very good. So we're learning all these different ways we can go about this. Very, very good. What do you observe? You could talk about that. How do you delete from a list? In College Board for the AP exam, they're gonna end up using the remove function, which is all caps. They're gonna have that list, and then remember, in the College Board, it starts with 1, not 0. Okay, update leaderboard function. We're just blowing right through this. So let's move on. Section 8, the update leaderboard function. So it's time to complete the code for the update leaderboard function. The goal of this function is to insert the player's name and score at the appropriate position on the leaderboard. The leaderboard is maintained in descending order, meaning we start with the highest and then we go to the lowest score, right? So observe the parameters for the update leaderboard function in leaderboard.py. Let's pop in there. Update leaderboard function in this. So I'm going to pop this down so we can stay organized here. I'm going to bring this, or I'm bringing both of those up, and then update leaderboard is what they were telling us. Now this is to-do number 8. Take a look. What are these called again? These are parameters. So we have the file name, we have the leader names, we have the leader scores, we have the player name, we have the player score. So this is the current player's name and the current player scores. What we've got to do is we got to loop through all of the scores in the existing leaderboard list, and then we're going to check if that's the position that we need to insert that new score at. Okay, now if our new score is greater than that current score that we're on, then we want to place it. Okay, if not, we're going to keep moving. All right, they also have insert the new player and scores. That's what we were talking about. They also have keep both lists at 5 elements only. So if we end up adding in a 6th entry, that person that's at the end, they got to go. All right, store the latest leaderboard back in the file. So we're going to also have that too. So it's going to be just that saved to it. So this, remember, if we use W, that's going to completely wipe everything out, right? Before we go to create or write, it's going to completely erase everything. So keep that in mind. Then we got to do 13 as well on there, and then after that we're done. So let's go ahead. Let's work through this. So in terms of the variable, so they have this like where they want you to break this down for each variable. So the file name, that's the actual name of our file, right? Remember, that is the relative path is what we have it down as. We also have the leader names. That is what is returned from the get names function. We also have the leader scores. That's returned from the get scores function. The player name is our current player, right? So as you'll remember, you know, we go in here and we asked at the very beginning, remember we did trtl dot and then text input. So player name, that's this guy right here. So we're going to be passing that in to our function. And then there's also going to be the player score. So at the end of the game, you'll remember that we did have that score, right? So the score variable is what we were keeping track of as global. So score is going to be passed into that, okay? So let's go back in here. So they have modify your A122 underscore leaderboard.txt file to have 5 entries with reasonable scores for a game that lasts only your test duration of 5 seconds. So let's go back in here. I want to be feeling like a boss, you know, so I'm going to end up giving all these other people, they're going to have some bad scores. So we got Shelly, we got Tim, we got Mel, we got Sally. These are all the OGs. We got to add in another new one, though. Let's put in Nathan, or let's put in Nader. That makes it, you know, that's more fun. We're going to go, let's go Nader, sorry, Nader, you didn't do too good. We're going to put in 2, we're going to put in 3, and then let's put in Shelly as 4. So she got some pretty good reaction time. Shelly, she has been consistently the champion. We're going to see if we can be as good as Shelly. So Shelly's got 4 there. So now let's go back into here. So we have those 5 entries. Remember, I did save that, so I put Control S at the end there, and I also still have that blank line at the end of the file, as I was talking about. For whatever reason, the students always forget to do that. So make sure that you're not making that rookie mistake. Find the to-do 8 section in leaderboard.py. Remove the block quotes notation that surrounds the block of code. So let's go back into to-do 8 in our leaderboard file. So to-do 8, boom. Let's take this guy out. Now remember, we got to take this guy out here too. Okay, nice. Now we're seeing some crazy errors. That's because our for loop does not have anything actually that we're iterating through. So they say loop through all the scores in the existing leaderboard list. So all the scores for score in leader scores. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be careful. I got to make sure that score is not being currently passed into here. So we do not have anything that's score, it's player score. What I can also do is I can be a little bit more specific. Leader score in leader scores. Keep in mind that, you know, those are kind of similar, so we might get messed up on that. Let's just keep that in mind. I'm going to go with the singular version because it's going to be going through each score. So check if this is the position to insert the new score at. So if, let's see here, so if the player score is greater than, let's go, we're equal to. We're going to have them, if they end up getting the same score, they're going to actually, boom, take that spot. So if the player score is greater than or equal to the leader score that we're currently on, then we want to end up, they have it as break. So let's see about all that. We're going to visit back to the e-text. But if not, then we're going to end up having the index increment. Now remember, how can we rewrite this? You could just end up doing this. So index plus equals 1. I always like using that little shorthand notation. But anyways, so what I want to check, so we have the if, then we break. Now I'm thinking that, yeah, we should end up breaking. Why is that? Because it is the case that we're at that specific score there. Now let's see here though. We do have the index, so we're gonna end up saving the index. Yeah, so if by the first entry we end up taking that over, the index is going to be equal to 0. So we're going to end up inserting that new player and score in there. So what we're going to end up doing here for to-do 9, let me make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'm so ready to crank all this stuff out, but we got to make sure that we're following this. Complete the for loop header so that it iterates through all the elements listed in there. Perfect. We've got it. For versus while, they end up talking about that. Since you need to modify the list element at a specific index, you need to iterate through each index value in the list, similar to how you create a variable index to keep track of a location in your while loop. You can also use the following syntax in the range method to keep track of an index with a for loop. Okay, great. So for index and range, and then we've got it where we're going through the length of the leader scores. So, like out here, instead of doing all this, we could have done that a little bit different, but we've got it in here. There's just, guys, that's the whole beauty of programming and coming up with this code, is that there's so many different ways you can end up going about this. What I also still want to end up talking to y'all about too in class is like even the get scores and get names. There's an even more efficient way of doing that too. So I want to end up talking to y'all about that in class. So please remind me if I don't end up telling you guys about that, to bring that up. But anyways, we've got it now where that's good. Now what I want to do is I want to insert that new player, so their player's name and then also the player's score at that specific index in our leader names list and our leader scores list. So if we're inserting the new player, we're going to go leader names. So let's insert the new player first, right? Insert. And then now, as we were saying, we need to end up specifying where that is. Now, before I get ahead of myself, let's go back. Let's look at the list methods. Let's make sure that what I'm doing here actually works. So we have something like this. So let's see here. Did they talk about insert in here? Inserting to the list. Yep, perfect. So the index is what we want to mention first, right? So insert at this index. We want to insert, now we want to insert that player name, right? Now, additionally, in the leader scores, not leader score, but the leader scores, I want to insert into here at that particular index, right? Because these are parallel lists, we want to insert that player's score, okay? Now, if the lists need to be the top 5 players, it should start off where from the get-go, we have it where those 5 players, right? So what we can end up doing is keep both lists at 5 elements only. So it's gonna be the top 5 players. Well, if we just added to that, then what we've also got to do is we've got to remove. So we got to go leader names, and we're going to remove that last value. So leader names.pop, leader scores.pop. Be careful. Make sure you're not making that little error where you're doing leader score instead of leader scores. We're going to pop off both of those values. That ensures that we're keeping it at 5 elements. Okay? Now, what we could also do, the reason why in class my setup, I ended up having more than 5 scores. You can test this out too. After you end up completing your code, try this out. Make a little note of this. Put in a 6th player into there. If you start with 6, the way that we have our code currently set up, it's going to end up keeping 6 players, right? So be thinking of a way after you have your code completed how you can end up making that change, so that if in the case you accidentally start with 6 players, then you can end up ensuring that it's only going to keep the top 5. All right. We'll come back to that too. Maybe that's something in class. You guys asked me about that. I can show you that. So to do 12, they have stored the latest leaderboard back in the file. So let's go ahead and let's make sure that we're not jumping the gun. I'm just like you guys. I always want to jump the gun here, but we got to be making sure that we're following along with this. So we had to do 9. The if header. So we had that to be inserted. So we had this, right? Greater than or equal to. Did we have greater than, or did I accidentally put less than? Okay, no, I did have greater than. Okay. So then we've got that one for to do 9. Then they got to do 10 here. Perfect. We ended up doing exactly that too. 41. Take a closer look at the now completed for loop. The break statement stops the execution of the loop. Yep, the for loop. And causes the program to start executing the line of code that comes after the loop code segment. So that's going to be where we end up inserting the player score as well as the player name in our leader scores list. Okay, so go ahead and explain how this for loop works and why it is important to use the break statement. So make sure that you got that written down in your engineering notebook. Once you got that, go ahead and pause, then come back. So they want us to test our program to confirm that the break statement and indexing is working properly. The leaderboard shows 6 entries, which is 1 too many. So why is that? That is because we did not pop that off yet. So in to do 11, that's where we ended up popping that. And so now if we run this, it should be the case where this is working. So let's do Control S. Let's save this. Let's try running this. Now keep in mind, I've got to get a score that's greater than 4 to be the leader, to beat Shelly. But if I get anywhere from, if I get over 0, then I'm going to make it on this leaderboard. So let's hope that I'm not that bad at this game. So I got to run this. Player's name, Mr. Rainbolt. Enter. Let's begin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh my gosh, I was so close to getting 6. So now as you can see, we've got it. Mr. Rainbolt's in there, and it's 5. One of the things that I'm kind of looking at, man, because my name was so long, it ended up popping out there quite a bit. So that might be something to kind of keep in mind. That's maybe something after we got this basic functionality, we can try to set that up too so that it accounts for that. So nice. Now in terms of any other errors, we're actually not receiving any other errors, so that's a pretty good sign here, guys. We're kind of killing it. So the break, yep, we got it. Let's see here. To do 7, if so, then remove the last element in each list because they represent the player in 6th place. We want the leaderboard to store only the top 5. Test your program. So we have that to remove that. Because the lists are parallel, you only need to determine the length of one of them. So they end up having it where if the length is greater than 5, then we want to pop that. What you could also do is while. You could use a while statement. And so that's kind of what I was talking to y'all about. Like once you complete this, you can try to like set this up where maybe you start off with like 6 or 7 entries. And then you can set it up where instead of using the if length of names, you could do while the length of the leader names is greater than 5, then you can pop those off. So keep that in mind. That's how you can go above and beyond with this. Now they have to remove the block codes at to do 12. So let's go ahead and pop there. So I'm going to go back to my leader custom module, store the latest leaderboard back in the file. So let's go ahead, let's comment this out. We got to comment this bad boy out now too. Now keep in mind here, we've got the rest of this. So this is showing error because this for loop is not completed, right? We have the indentation, then we're closing this file. They really like to glaze the option 1 for writing to a file. But so just remember, if you end up doing it using this method, make sure you got .close at the end. So let's see here, loop through all of the leaderboard elements and write them to the file. So what we can do is for, now let's take a look at this, leader underscore names index, and then we've got a string index. Let's go ahead, let's do this for index in range, where it's the length of our, let's use, remember, parallel lists. If we have the leader scores, perfect. We can end up using that. The length of both of these will be the same, so it doesn't matter if you choose leader scores or leader names. What it's going to do is it's going to look at the range of values. So if we have a length of 5, it's going to start at 0, and then it's going to go all the way to, not including 5, it's going to go to 4 there. And so now we can end up doing that. And what's going to end up happening is it's going to write into that text file these new names. And so just as we were saying here, you know, it like showed that I was on the leaderboard, but it actually didn't save, right? It actually did not update. And so now what we can do here is we can write to that file. It's basically going to wipe out this entire thing. So I'm going to also copy this just in case we can back up our leaderboard file, because it's going to wipe it because we're using the W method, right? So we can have that. But it's going to go through, it's going to write on each line this information. And at the end, we do want to ensure that we are concatenating on there that \n so that we create the new line. Then we can close the file. So let's go ahead, let's test this code out, everybody. Let's go back to the here. We're going to run this, input the name. Let's go with something. We're going to kick it old school, the retro arcade games. Usually you had to put in your initials. We're going to put DR, the doctor. We're going to click OK, and then let's begin. I'm going to try to make the high score. Oh, these turtles are too far away from each other. Dang it. But I still got it. I was hoping to get 6, though. So now we can see that we have Doctor on there, 5. We have Shelly, 4, Tim, 3, Mel, 2, and then Sally's on there, 1. I forgot who it was that we had at the end that had 0, but sorry, buddy. You got kicked off. You got kicked out of there. So we go back to this. As you can see, it also now updates in our file where we are able to write our initials on there that we just ended up inputting into there. Okay, so let's take a look here. So remove the block codes. We end up using the write function, right? They end up talking about that. They have complete the for loop header, which we ended up doing. Now, what do we have to end up doing for that? We had to do 4 index, and then we did the in-range length of the leader scores. That ensures that we get the index starting at 0, and then it's going to go all the way to 1 before the actual length of that list. And so that we don't get that index out of range error. Now, check your code so they have that for index and range, exactly like we said, or you could have it where it's the leader scores. It's up to you. What they want to do is test your code, confirm that the leaderboard text file has been updated and the leaderboard is functioning properly. That's exactly what we just ended up doing. Let's pop into section 9. So this is the draw leaderboard function. So to finish the leaderboard, you will display messages about the leaderboard on the turtle screen. So recall, that, what were they just saying? Recall that the function manage leaderboard, which you added into the Catch a Turtle program at the beginning of the activity, it calls the get names, get scores, update leaderboard, and draw leaderboard function. So we called those. Observe the if statement in the manage leaderboard function. So manage leaderboard function. So let's see here. We're going to go back into our actual code here. So this is the main code. So we got manage leaderboard, and so they're wanting us to look at this if statement. So if the length of the leader scores list is less than 5, or the score is greater than or equal to the leader scores list that's at column 4 or in index 4, which is the last item, then they actually want us to end up calling this. Now what this is doing is it's saving us time, because then it's only going to update the leaderboard if the player's score currently is greater than that last score that's on our in our code. We don't want to run this code, for instance, if the score that we currently just got is not greater than that last entry in our leader scores. Okay, so nice. They basically end up talking about that. So if the player makes the leaderboard, then we want to update that text file, right? So shown below, the draw leaderboard function calls include a Boolean value. So they have true and then they have false. So what do you think the first argument is used for? So let's see here, LB draw leaderboard. So let's go back into here. LB, where's that draw leaderboard? True. So if we go into the draw leaderboard function, high scorer. So if they're a high scorer, then we want to end up doing something. So let's see here. Do they have that? Ooh, they don't. They just have 14. So display message about player making, not making a leaderboard. Okay, so then they have that. All right. So we're going a little bit above and beyond here. So this Boolean is used to identify whether the player made the leaderboard. If yes, then we want to display a message congratulating the player. If no, then a message of encouragement is displayed instead. So maybe we're going to say, hey, just don't suck next time. Therefore, we need to make sure we send in a true or a false based on the player's achievement. So find to do 14 in our custom module. Remove the block quotes and add an if or else statement that shows the correct message if the player has a high score. So if we're going to add these in here, the good old if statements. If, and this is pretty easy, if we can put in here high score, remember, if high score is true, then we're going to execute this code. Now else, then we're going to write, sorry, what do they say? You didn't make the leaderboard, maybe next time. So that is some encouragement, everybody. I'm feeling encouraged. So we ended up adding those in. So we have the if or else statement. They have test our program now. So let's test it out. Let's try it. We got to go back into this function. Remember, if you run your module, the leaderboard module, it's not going to actually do anything because we're not actually calling anything in this. So we now have this. So let's run our main code. Let's put in RB for rainbolt. Let's do that. 1, 2. Oh, my timing wasn't as good, guys. My timing was not as good. Oh my gosh. So RB, I ended up making it onto the leaderboard. Nice. Now let's try it. We got to test the case out. What if I'm like terrible? We're going to go RB again. And then now I got to get a score of 0. So, sorry, you didn't make the leaderboard. Maybe next time. Very, very good. So, does our code work as expected? Indeed. Indubitably. Let's go to logical operators Boolean. So this is actually the second to last thing here. We're going to also display the achievement level. So let's go ahead, let's go in here. So we've got logical operators, Boolean. So far you have used relational operators that compare two values such as equals equals, not equal to, less than, and greater than. However, there are additional operators called Boolean operators, often referred to as logical operators. Similar to relational operators, logical operators compare two Boolean expressions and are commonly used in conditional statements and while loop headers. So these are what we've talked about in class. We have the AND operator that returns true if both expressions evaluate to true. So for instance, if we have grade, and if the grade is greater than or equal to 70 and the grade is also less than 80, then it's the case that your grade's a C, right? We also have the OR. Now this is going to return true if either one of the expressions are true, right? So what we can do is if color is blue or the color is green, I like that color too, right? Because that would be the case where you only like the colors blue and green. So if either of those are true, then you can end up saying, hey, I like that color too. The not operator, what this is going to do is it's only going to use one Boolean expression. Now, of course, you can end up using not, and then you can say not false, right? Or not done. In this case, they have it where it's not done. So then that must mean if something's not false, it must be true, right? So you can use the and or ors in combination with this though. So they have though in this, so done equals false. If it's not false, then it must be true, right? So then done is going to be then equal to true. Then if it's not true, then that must mean that it's false, right? So review the code without running it. It includes relational and logical operators. So what do you think the output will be? Let's test that out. X equals 4, Y equals 8, Z equals 12. We're printing out the variables. So we print out what X, Y, and Z are equal to. And then we're going to print out a new line there in line 10. It's printing out that new line. Line 13, X is greater than Y and Z is greater than Y evaluates to. So if X is greater than Y, so is X greater than Y? That's false. And Z is greater than Y. Well, Z is greater than Y. So we have this particular case where this is false and true. If something's false and true, that means it's going to be false by default. Now about right here, X is greater than Y. So is X greater than Y? No, that's false. Or is Z greater than Y? So Z greater than Y? Yes, that's true. So if we have false or true, we're going to default to true. So let's go ahead. We should end up putting this down. So we got true here. Let's comment this. So we're going to have true. This is going to be false, right? Because one of these two are false for the and statements. So if we have X is less than Y, that is true. And we can, let's do this even. True and Y is less than Z, true. So then that's going to evaluate to being true. So I'm going to do that. So that's going to be our final answer, what's going to be printed out there. Not X is greater than Y. So X greater than Y, that's false. If something's not false, then it must be true. Then let's do this one. X is less than Y. Well, that's just the opposite of what we had here. So X is less than Y. So that's true. If something's not true, then it must be false. So now this is what we think is going to end up printing out. And so we can check right here. So we have false, true, 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 false, perfect. We ended up getting it. So we ran the code, our prediction was correct. They also end up mentioning in here, they use the Boolean or the logical operators here, and, or not. You definitely will end up seeing some questions on your AP test, especially the practice AP test for that. Now they have displayed the achievement level on here. So they have for the last message on the leaderboard, you will notify the player if they have achieved a bronze, silver, or gold level of play. Review the values for the bronze score, silver score, and gold score variables in the leaderboard.py file. Now this was at the very, very top. You'll end up seeing here. So we have the levels of scoring. Now they have review the values for the bronze score. Okay, so we did that. To determine a player's achievement level, you could write an elif statement with the logical and operator. So if the player score is greater than or equal to the bronze score and the player score is less than the silver score, then we want to end up writing that in. So find to do 15, remove the block quotes, the block quotes, and rewrite the if-elif statement above. So let's find here. We can do Control F. Let's search this puppy to do. Now we want 15. Nice. So now, let's go ahead and take this out. 1, 2, boom, 3. Let's take this guy out too. 1, 2, 3, boom. Now remember, we have the if. So if this certain condition and another condition is true, then we want to display, hey, you received the gold level. Now remember, we also want to end up putting an elif. Now this is if this first statement is not true, then we can go into the elif statement, right? Now what we can do here is then we can put in the else. So this is where we're gonna kind of be careful here. Maybe it's else, or maybe we'll use elif. So let's see here. So if we end up writing, okay, so if they make it onto the leaderboard, then we would use the else statement, right? If we had this all right here and being a high score, then that would be true, right? Because they made it to the leaderboard. Now, if we don't have it in that if statement, then we can't say else. So we can put an elif statement in here now, unless if we're otherwise informed about this. So now what we've got to do is we've got to actually display this if some certain condition is true. So let's take a look back here. So if the score is greater than and then less than that. So they want us to use this and, I mean, obviously by default, we've got to check for gold. Gold would be if they're anywhere from the gold. I'm guessing that the gold score is the, I don't know if that's, we're going to have to take a look at this. I don't know if the gold score, if that's like, say I think that the gold score is if you end up achieving at that level. So I think that if you're equal to or greater than the gold score, then that's the case that you're a gold score. So let's go ahead and let's put this in here. So if display nothing, if no medal. Okay, so we have that. Display a gold if the player earned a gold, silver, or bronze medal. Okay, so nice. So they earned a gold medal. So if their score, so let's see here. So what is our current score called? Let me take this out. What is our current score? High scorer. What are we passing into here? High scorer, leader names, leader scores, player score. So if player score greater than or equal to, let's see here, so gold score, that should be the case. What we can also do in here is if high score and the player is like that, right? So that's how we can use that and. However, it should be, you know, I don't know. They want us to do this based off of practice. I would not actually write this code out though, normally. Why is that? Because if the player score is greater than or equal to the gold score, then by default, right, that should be the case where they end up getting the gold medal. But just to kind of get this practice of using our and statements, we can end up doing that. So if, now in this case, if you end up having the silver medal, it should be the case where our player score is less than the gold score, and I put hold score, so gold score, and it is greater than, oops, I gotta put in this, so player score is less than the gold score, and the player score is greater than or equal to, and then we've got the silver score. So if it's that. Now the last elif, this is going to be the case, you know, we can also put this in here too. You can put as many of these and statements in here, so all of these should be true, right? What we can do here is we can do high score, and it should be the case where the player score is less than the silver score, and the player score is greater than or equal to that bronze score. Okay, so now keep in mind our cutoff points 15, 20, and 25. So guys, if I did that in 3 seconds, that'd be so impressive. What I've got to do before we test this out to make sure that this works, I've got to change my time back to the original timer where it's 30. Now this is also based off of your difficulty, right? If you want to make it more difficult, then don't have your timer be 30. You could also end up having it where it's like random if you wanted to, right? But then obviously, you know, it's kind of more based off of chance or luck if they'll end up winning or making onto the scoreboard. So I'm going to set it as 30. Let's go ahead, let's test this out. What should end up occurring, what should end up happening is that we should have it show up. Boom, we are gold, or we're bronze, or we're silver status. So let's go ahead and put this in. I'm going to put RB on this one. So let's go ahead, let's begin. We got to make the high score here, guys. Come on. We're going to try to go for that gold status. I'm not even looking at the score, but I actually saw that it was 8. Now it's 9, 10. So we got to make it to 25. Oh my gosh. My palms are getting sweaty. I'm starting to sweat. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I think we're doing pretty good on timing. 20. Oh yeah, we got this on lockdown. Lockdown. We'll see if you guys can beat my score. Oh, I didn't see where that one was. I just lost. 3, 2. Oh my gosh. Oh, didn't get the last one, I don't think. So what we ended up doing is we ended up earning the gold medal. Now what you can do is you can go ahead and test this out. So we ended up getting 32 there, right? So we can end up going in, if we get like 20 or 21, you can test that, right? Just select 21 turtles. You can also select it where it's 16 turtles. So let's test it. I'm gonna go back into this. I'm gonna end up testing this for bronze status. So let's go ahead, let's do it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we got to get 16 because I think 15 was our cutoff for bronze. So I'm gonna get 15 here. And then we're going to wait just to make sure that we got bronze. Oh, crap. I went over. Okay, so 18. I'm not going to get to 20, though, because then I'd be at silver. So we got 18. So now we just wait. 2, 1. Let's see. Did our code work out? We are in the bronze medal. Nice. And then last, we got to check the silver medal. So let's go RB again. I think I'm just like doing the RB takeover here is what we got. So timer. And then, so let's go through this. Boom. Now we got to get to 20. That's what we want to be at. So 20. So now that I'm at 20, you know, we could test this case too. If it's equal to 20, right, then it should be silver. You can also do this where you go over 20 to make sure that that works. There's so many different things to test for this. But as you can see, we end up reaching 20, so we got the silver medal. So we tested gold, we tested silver, we tested bronze. Everything is working pretty well. And so now, change the timer back to 30. They say play multiple times. Try to score in each of the 3 achievement levels and make sure that the code works for each scenario. We've got that. Also test a scenario where you do not achieve any of these levels. So let's go ahead and run that code, and then while we're running this, we'll put drain in there. So then while we're running this, I should put rainbolt, good old email. Fix any error that you find and test again. Remember to record any errors that you find. So congratulations, your leaderboard is complete. And so we're going to end up seeing if this guy ends up working. So we got about 15 more seconds to test that. But these are the conclusion questions. Make sure that you're looking these over. Make sure that you're answering these in your computer science notebook. But we're going to end up finding out here after this timer reaches 3 or 0 if we end up doing this correctly. Perfect. We ended up getting sorry, and we ended up getting our words of encouragement there. Nothing showed up for us making it to the leaderboard. So what we know is that our code works. Anyways, guys, that is the run through of activity 122, catch a turtle leaderboard. You just ended up creating your first custom module in Python. We've got a pretty rocking game now where we can end up scoring into either gold status, silver, bronze, or if we don't score into any of those, we're going to end up getting some words of encouragement. We also end up completing our code so that our leaderboard will be saved to an actual text file. It'll be saved permanently, right? So that then we can end up keeping track of our leaderboard. But anyways, have fun with it. Make some awesome changes even if you want to, like add on to this code even further, try to make it even better. Maybe you want to add in sound. Guess what? You can do that with Python. You can add wind sound, right? So you could use that to add in sound effects whenever you catch the turtle. You could also have it where it's like some background music. You could also change even these messages that are showing up. You can make this leaderboard look a whole lot better, a whole lot cleaner too. So many different options. But anyways, that was our run through of this. I hope that was helpful, and I'll catch you all later in the next video. Bye-bye.